In the setup menu, we are going to have a mix of features, some of which are super important and other items that are really arcane, seeming like they're just not that important. So let's go ahead and dive in and find out which ones are the most important that we need to deal with. All right, first up, record function card folder select. This one is an important one. All right, so this is how we are recording images and onto what card they are going to. And with two cards and two very different styled and capable cards, there's going to be a lot of options. So we also have stills versus video. And so we've got a number of things that we can do about separating out different files and choosing where they go. So the first option is, do you want to separate your video with your still images? Some people do. You've got that fast CF Express card where you might want to be sending your larger movie images to, and then the SD card would be for the stills. That's the normal operation. You could reverse it, but not sure why, but you could. But if you want to have them all going to one card or being separated, you can choose this first out here. Next up, this is for your stills. You see the little camera there. How do you want your options for recording? Standard means it goes to one card, and you will get to choose which card is your primary card here in a setting coming up in a moment. You can do auto switch, which means that the overflow, once one card fills up, it automatically goes to the next card. I like that one. That's a pretty good one. That way you're unlikely to fill up all your memory at any one time. You can record separately. So if you want to separate RAWs versus JPEGs onto one card versus the other, you can do that. And then for the paranoid photographer, also the professional photographer, you can record to multiple. So if you're shooting RAW, you can have RAW go to both cards at the same time. And of course, you do know that these cards are very different in their capability of how fast they can write information. And so if you are writing RAW images to both cards simultaneously, you can only shoot as fast as the slower card can keep up. And so be aware of that when you are doing movies or shooting RAW and shooting lots of images on here. And so standard is fine in many cases because you're just going to one card. The other card slot is just kind of like a card holder at that point. It's not doing anything. If that first card fills up, you would have to manually switch it over. And so I think auto switch is good for people who are shooting lots of images and just want a convenient overflow, fill up both of them. Record to multiple is good for those of you who are shooting professionally, who want to make backups in the field to be just in case safe for everything. All right, next up, kind of the same options for those of you shooting video in your camera. You can shoot video just to one card. If you are, that's when you want to have the CF Express card because they have so many more options that you can record to with that. And so this camera, as I mentioned before, really works best in video with a CF Express card. The auto switch will fill up one card and then it will overflow, go to the next card. Be aware though, if you have a fairly high data rate for a movie set and you start going to the SD card, the camera may stop because it can't record a lot of stuff. 8K video, high bit 4K video is not going to be able to be recorded on the SD card, so it'll only work in some cases with some settings of the video. Then you can record separately as well, and so this is where you might have RAW images on one card and then your video files on another card. As far as recording and playback, what is your primary card for still images? As I say, using the CF Express card, that will probably be your main card, or it should be. It's a little bit more durable, it's faster, they can come in larger sizes, and so good option to choose if you have that ability. Same thing with video, and even more recommendation here about using that CF Express card for shooting video. Now, as far as the images on the card itself, you can create and store images in different folders. And so if you have different jobs, assignments, or you want to separate and you only have one memory card, or if you just want to separate it on a memory card, you can create different folders in here and have images directed towards those different folders. All right, next up is file numbering. And so with each of your images or video files, there is a number that goes along with it. And it generally will start at 0001 and then go up to 10,000 and then repeat itself, which is a good reason why you want to rename your files once you've exported them out of your camera and put them onto a computer program of some sort. But if you want to reset this number, you can. Don't usually recommend it because you don't want to end up with lots and lots of photos that end in 0001. You can manually reset the folder numbers in here if you want to, if you are using that folder system for storing your images. Next up is the file name. And so this is the 3 or 4 letters that begin out the file name of each of the images that you shoot. And so when you come in here, generally there's going to be kind of this random 3 or 4 digit number letter sequence that you can choose. You can also have one that has the image size designated by a single letter if you want in there. And so a RAW is C, because it's a Canon RAW, I think. C RAW is large, and so is large is L. So I don't understand why they use L for both of those. M is for medium, S is for small, and what's smaller than S is the next letter in the alphabet, which is T, of course. So those will just help you know immediately by looking at the file what size of file or what type of file it is. All right, if you want to change the letter codes, you can have actually 2 presets set in here. So you could type in a particular set of letters, your initials, a job name, a client name, something you're doing on a regular basis. And so you could type in these presets and select them later on when you're using the camera for that situation. This one's an important one. This is one that I come back to more than anything else in the setup menu, and that is to format the card. So when I am wanting to go out on a shoot, what I will do is I will check the card to see if there's any images on it. I'll check to make sure that I have downloaded and backed those cards up. And then I want to go out on this new shoot or trip or whatever with a clean memory card that is free of space, don't have last Christmas's photos on there, anything like that, and has a clean line of communication between the card and the camera. And so I'll reformat the card, and actually many times I'll do the low-level format, which is a deeper scrub of the cleaning of the card, you might say. And so this gets rid of the photos, gets rid of the directory, any ghost photos or files that may be on the card, and establishes a clean line of communication with the camera. And by doing this on a regular basis, you will extend the life of your memory card. And so it's good to do that on a regular basis so that your card has a nice clean bit of data to work with, or a clean slate to put that data on. All right, as far as rotating your images, I recommend the on computer. So what happens there is that the camera will rotate the images for verticals, because the camera knows when you turn the camera vertically, and it will rotate those when you download those to your computer. But it will not do it on the back of your camera. And the advantage for that is that you can look at the back of your camera and see a much larger image when it just says on computer. And if you just shot the camera in, or shot the image in vertical, you can probably look at it in vertical. The main reason that you wouldn't want to use this feature is that if you are hooking your camera up to do some sort of slideshow and you can't turn the monitor or turn the camera, or it's inconvenient for that reason. But normally just set this on computer for easy viewing of your images. You can add rotation information for your video. And so vertical video is a thing. There are people that have vertical monitors, and there's reasons why you might want vertical video. And if you want to add that rotation information in there, you can do so in here. Time, date, and zone here, obvious adjustments that you want to set in there. Not much to say about that. Same thing with the language, choose what's appropriate. The video system. There are different video systems in different parts of the world, and so choose the appropriate one for the part of the world that you're going to be working with your video system. Help text size. So one of the things you can do is you can hit the info button to get more help on a particular feature, and you get to choose how big the text is. This, and there's another feature that we'll talk about in here as well, definitely gives you some options for those of us who don't have as good of close range focusing as we used to have. So if you need to see it a little bit bigger, You can set it on the standard size, but I think most people are going to be fine with the small, which is kind of the standard size for the menu fonts. The beep. All right, little personal beef here. I'm not a big fan of the beep. It's annoying to people that you're working around, people that you're shooting. It's there. It was originally designed, I think, just to let people know that their camera is in focus and it's ready to shoot a photo. There are indicators in the viewfinder that can do that without disturbing other people. There are reasons why you might need the beep in there to confirm that the camera focused, because you can't look through the viewfinder because it's mounted in an unusual place or something like that. So I would recommend turning this off for the sanity of everyone else on the planet. But this is something that also can be turned on when you are using the touch screen, or you can turn it off in that aspect as well. If you are going to be monitoring sound with the headphone, you can come in here and adjust the volume, make sure it's appropriate for what you're doing. Power saving sends us into a little bit of a submenu, and so this is going to be how quickly the displays will shut off. Usually 1 minute is fine. Adjust as necessary. How quickly does the camera power down? And so one is just the display turning off, this one is actually the camera powering down, and so that's usually a longer period of time. And then how quickly do you want the viewfinder to turn off, because that also can use a fair bit of battery power if you have that on all the time. The camera also has an eco mode where the camera will shut down and the screen will darken after about 2 seconds. And turns off after 10 seconds. So they could have put this in the power saving little submenu in there, but it's just a real quick one that you can turn on and off. Normally you're going to leave it turned off unless you're running low on batteries, and that's becoming a major issue. All right, on to page 3, screen and viewfinder display. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the class, and viewfinder, the Auto 2 option is going to be good here. The EVF is activated when the screen is flipped out, and then the eye sensor is activated in there as well. And so you can switch back and forth between the viewfinder and the LCD even when it's flipped out. You can adjust the screen brightness. Generally, it's not really necessary, but if you are working out in bright sunlight, you may need to pump up the brightness so that you can see it a little bit more easily. If you're working at nighttime, you might want to bring it down so it doesn't hurt your night vision. You can also adjust the viewfinder brightness. I tend to like to have this just set on manual, put it right in the middle, that way it's not changing on you, because it's sometimes how we adjust our exposure is how bright that screen or the viewfinder is. If there's an issue with the color, it seems to have drifted or just doesn't seem to be right to your eyes, you can adjust that with these 2 settings, the screen viewfinder color tone and the fine tune for the viewfinder color tone. And so generally you're not going to need this, but if you do need it, at least it's there that you can make a little tweak in that if necessary. So here you can do a double tap for magnification. And so if you have a hard time reading the back of the camera, you can turn this on. In fact, let's go ahead and take a look at this in person here. So if we go in and let's see, what page are we on? We're on page 3, UI magnification, disable. We can enable this. And so then if you punch in twice with both fingers, tap twice, you can see your menu in a larger font there. And so if that helps you see what's going on, then you can set that on. For most people, they're probably not going to need that, so you could probably leave that on disable. Next up, if you are connecting the camera via the HDMI connection on the side of the camera, how does it communicate and in what resolution is it sending the signal out? Generally auto, it'll work with the TV or monitor to figure things out, or you could set it at 1080p if for some reason it's not picking up on that setting. The touch control on the back of the camera can be turned on and off here. And this is a bit of a personal standard. We do also have a standard and sensitive setting if it's not picking up on your fingers. I don't know, maybe if you're wearing glove or the types of gloves that allow you to work on the screen and it's not quite the right texture to it, you can set it to sensitive and it might work a little bit better in those situations. But standard should work for most people most of the time. We talked about the lock on the top of the camera. This is something that can lock many of the controls on the camera, so if you don't want to use the touch screen, If you are a sports photographer or you are just wanting to lock in your shutter speeds, apertures, and ISOs, and in case you bump any of the dials, you don't want those exposure adjustments to change on you, you can have that set right in there to the lock. What you do is you come in here and you check off all the items that you do want to be able to lock by pressing that button. And it's quite customizable, which is really nice, so that you can leave some things active and adjustable and other things not. The shutter will automatically close when you shut the camera down. And so if you are exchanging lenses, this is a good feature to prevent dust getting in on the sensor. I wish other manufacturers did this. In fact, I think this is the only brand that is doing it that I can think of, but I think it's something we'll likely see more of in the future. Do be careful though, when you do not have a lens on the camera, don't poke your finger in there and say, oh, what's this little device in here? That's the shutter and you're not supposed to touch it. So generally leaving this closed is going to be a smart choice most of the time. We can also do some sensor cleaning in here. We have the automatic sensor cleaning, and this is where the camera shakes the little low pass filter in front of the sensor to knock off any dust. It'll generally do that on its own. I like to have it do it at power off. And so that way when you shut the camera down, it goes through a little cleaning and then it's ready for the next time when you turn the camera on. You can do it now, which is something you could also just turn the camera on and off for, but if you want to come into the menu, you can have it do that little sensor shake right then and there. And if you want to clean it manually, you can do it yourself. Now, this is something that I don't recommend for everyone, but I do think is fine for many people who have a careful hand and they're the type of people that, like to repair little things. And so first thing that pretty much I think everyone can do is you can get one of these rocket blowers. And the idea is you would take the lens off, you would put it in the clean manually mode. That way the shutter opens up. Hold the camera upside down so the sensor is pointed downward, and then blow air by squeezing the rocket blower in on the sensor in various areas and various angles, trying to knock dust off of the sensor. That'll often solve the problem in many cases. But if it doesn't, sometimes there's something kind of sticky that is on the sensor, and you can use something like the Lens Pen Sensor Clear 2. There are a variety of these devices out there where you go in and you have to be very careful and manually sweep across the sensor like this and get the dust off. And so you might need a magnifying loupe to see exactly where that dust is. You might need a good, powerful but small flashlight in order to see in there as you are doing it. All right, next up is page 5. We can reset the camera as we talked about earlier in this class at the very beginning. So you can do a basic resetting, which clears off a lot of the standard settings on the camera, but there's a lot of things it does not clear off. And so if you do want to clear those other things, you're going to need to go to the next setting, which is other settings. And here you have a lot longer list of different particular areas that you might want to reset. And so it is nice to be able to have individual control over resetting certain areas that you might have been in playing and working in a certain environment, and now you completely want to get rid of all those settings. And so don't reset these if you have been following along in the class getting your camera reset up, but if you do want to take it back to the factory default settings, go ahead and reset all of those. The custom shooting modes is something we talked about back in the exposure section, and this is where you get to set the camera up as you like it, and the camera will remember a wide variety of settings for 3 different controls: what exposure mode, what shutter speed, aperture, motor drive, metering system, all sorts of controls. Get the camera set up and then come in here and register them to either C1, C2, or C3. If you want to clear the settings that are currently in there, you could clear them individually here. And then if you want to update them, you can update them here as well with your current settings that you have. You can save and load settings from a card that you have from perhaps a different camera. So let's say you're going to loan your camera to a friend, or your camera's going to go to the repair shop, or it's going to be involved in doing something and you're going to be changing all the settings on it. What you can do is you can save everything to the memory card, and then you can send it off, and then when it comes back, you can reload all those settings back onto the camera with that memory card. Be careful not to format that memory card. And so saving and loading settings, and this could also work if you're using multiple cameras and you want to have them all set up the same way. Lucky person to have multiple R5s. All right, page 6, battery info. This one's a nice one. You get to check out which battery is in the camera and how much of a charge it has and how the recharge performance is, which is kind of the overall lifespan on the camera. And so one of the things to be aware of, and I want to show you in here, is that there is a info button to press for a little bit more information. And so under battery info, we'll hit set, and you can hit info here. And this battery is registered on this camera, and it tells me when where the charge was when I was last on it. Now, if you have multiple batteries, you could have them in here and you could see how big a battery charge you have on those other batteries. Now, it doesn't work if you take that battery and it sits there for 2 months and it slowly depletes in size, or if that battery gets put in another camera and it gets used. But if you want to see and register them, you can. It's not the most valuable feature, but I think it is kind of interesting to know about. All right, as far as copyright information, I'm going to head into a little submenu where you can enter your name and copyright. First up, display what is currently there. Then you can enter your name, and I don't see a real harm in doing this. It's going to add into the metadata of the photos that you shoot. And if somebody finds your camera and they want to return it to you, at least they'll have a name to go with, especially if that's a police station. You could enter copyright information or contact information. So you put your email in here. If somebody found your camera, it was stolen, you left it behind accidentally, and somebody wants to be honest, I like to give people who are honest the opportunity to do the right thing. And so you could put some copyright or contact information in here. And if you want to delete what's currently in there, well, come here and get rid of it. All right, the manual and software can be downloaded to your phone with this QR code reader. And so if you want a quick tip on how to set something in the camera and you have your phone with you, you can scan the code. Little logos to show what sort of approval the camera has gotten in different countries. And then there is the firmware. We talked about this before, but it's worth talking about again. This is the software that runs the camera. Canon makes updates from time to time. You'll need to go to Canon's website, download the appropriate software, put it onto a memory card, put the memory card in the camera, and come here in the setup menu, and the camera will recognize that there's new firmware, and it will ask you if you would like to update the firmware, and you would probably say yes at that point. It'll take 3, 4, 5 minutes for it to do its little thing, and then boom, you'll have the new latest software for the camera. Now, there is also software for lenses, and that does change from time to time. Now, when you do download this package from Canon, it's going to have a file, and on part of it is just going to be some PDFs of instructions. There'll be a folder of that, and so then there'll be another file that is the actual firmware, and that's what you want to load up onto the memory card itself. So be aware that there is a bit of a package that you're downloading from Canon in that regard. So make sure you keep your firmware up to date. Go back to Canon's website, check it out every 6 months to once a year or so, and see if there is something new and important that you need to take care of. So there you go, folks. That's your setup menu. Hopefully your camera is fully set up and you know which items you're going to want to come back to on a regular basis.